You are watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, and now let's go to Straight Talk from the two sessions. It's both the name and the style of our exclusive interview series featuring big names coming from all walks of life in China during China's political season. A person, a talk, a day. Today, let's meet Jia Qingguo, a CPPCC Standing Committee member this year and also the Dean of the School of International Studies at Peking University. Professor Jia will talk about his thoughts on China's institutional reform. China has unveiled a massive institutional reform plan on Tuesday, which aims to make the government better structured, more efficient, and service-oriented. Take a look.
The composition of the State Council will be 26 ministries and commissions. The new ministries will cover national resources, ecology, agriculture, and rural areas, veteran affairs, and emergency management. A new National Health Commission will also be set up. There will be an administration for immigration affairs and a new agency for international development cooperation. The government will have a new financial watchdog, a banking and insurance regulatory commission, and a national market supervision commission to be affiliated with the State Council. According to the plan, the number of ministerial-level entities will be reduced by 8 and vice-ministerial entities by 7. The goal is to strengthen the government's functions in economic management, market supervision, social management, public services, and environmental protection.
How should we understand the significance of this related to China's deepening reform? Professor?
I think it's very important. During the past years of development, a lot of problems revealed that our state and party institutions, some of them may be outdated, may be overlapping in their responsibilities. So there is a great demand to streamline and rationalize these institutions to make sure that they function properly and more efficiently.
How to communicate this plan to the rest of the world?
Well, the government has a lot to do. Well, first of all, it needs to make sure that the Chinese people understand the rationale of reforms. You need to explain to the people the logic to it, why, you can do things better this way. And if people can understand, if our diplomats, officials, and common people can understand this, they can tell the rest of the world the rationale of it more efficiently. So, homework begins at home.
Beautifully said. Homework begins at home, and we are beginning that homework. Having said that, though, whose responsibility is it? And eventually get it done.
Well, certainly, institutional changes may touch off strong reactions from the society, especially the established interests. Okay? In that sense, probably we need strong leadership to make sure that the institutional changes can happen and make sure that the resistance of the established interests is subdued to some extent. But at the same time, of course, we should make sure that people have voices heard.
To articulate the plan.
Articulate their interests and their concerns, and then all these are
being
taken into consideration and then reflected in the plan for change. Reform the Chinese government to become more efficient and more constructive in terms of the role to play in the future.
And also these reforms could go as a regional plan. That is also important. But of course, it depends on a lot of different factors. One of them is, as we said earlier, the communication is done well or not. This is not only about home, but also about international communication. How has China been doing that communication work?
To some extent, we have accomplished quite a good deal. But more efforts needs to put in to make sure that our audience understand what we want to tell them.
Explain, for those who may not necessarily know China's history of communicating with the rest of the world, what exactly you meant.
For example, there is a saying that the National People's Congress, NPC, is not a Western legislative body. We have a question. Nobody assumes that this is a Western legislative body. Why does NPC delegation visit other legislative bodies overseas? You have to make sure that you understand the logic of it before you can tell the rest of the world why we have this institution and what kind of institution it is, what's the rationale of it, that sort of thing.
China has entered into a new era. In this era, the nation has to deal with international turbulence and global challenges. China well understands that. China is still developing very fast, but it is also necessary to have a breather. Let's take a listen to what Professor Jia has to say about this. Let's just say China's history. For thousands of years, China had the feudal society. And of course, that is a totally societal system compared to what we are having today here in China and in the rest of the world. That was more of a quote-unquote ruler and the people or the public. There's also the system coming from the West could be of reference. So when you have a rich history but outdated system, and when you also have reference coming from other parts of the world, including those coming from Western democracies, how is China going to get to know the real essence of all and come up with the best plan?
Well, I think there is a relationship between stability and the ability to explain the system. Okay. The ancient Chinese political system was very stable. Why? Because they have a beautiful logic to it. Okay? As you said, the emperor is the son of heaven. He has the mandate to rule. Okay? But at the same time, according to the Chinese political elite at the time, he needs to take care of the people. He has weighty responsibilities. Okay? If he cannot take care of the people, if people suffer under his rule, then, according to Mencius, he loses his mandate to rule. So people have a right to overthrow this guy. Okay? So there is a logic to it. That's most people, the political elite, and also the common people, subscribe to this kind of logic. That's why the Chinese politics was so stable for thousands of years.
During the feudal society.
Despite the dynastic changes, the political system remains. Okay. The Western society had their own political systems at different times. In the old days, they had the God-centered system. They have a logic to it. And now they have a so-called people's democracy system, and they have their own logic to it. As long as you have you provide acceptable rationale to this kind of system, then the system can be stable. Okay? So the question to us is, what kind of system should we build on the basis of the previous experiences that fits the Chinese current situation, okay, according to Chinese conditions? I think we should draw, the best from all
possibilities.
These political arrangements in history, and develop our system. This is what we have been doing. Okay.
And it has to be updated.
Yeah, things change, and also nothing is perfect. We need to try to improve the system over time, and the one cause or one factor that may help us to improve our system is to try to tell, to try to explain your system, try to clarify various aspects of the system, the logic of the system, and then find out, where we have a problem in explaining the logic, and then try to fix the problem. And that's one way to make progress, to make sure that the system is refined and also keep up with the changes of the time.
When you think about the system from the West, let's just say our contemporary history, they seem to have experienced several ups and downs. When you look at where China is today, Professor, we are in a new era, something very different we never had before. We become the second largest economy in the world. We become a very important player in international governance. We become one reformer to the international system, while at the same time pushing forward a deep reform within the country ourselves. So this is something we have never experienced before. How during this process, still perfecting our system, make it always better if we can?
Well, I think we need to keep up with the changes. The changes have happened actually very fast. It's difficult to catch up. But Chinese Communist Party and the government have made a lot of efforts. And the recent round of institutional reforms is part of this effort to keep up with the changes of the times. As you mentioned, China has become the second largest economy, in part because of that. It has become more attractive to foreigners, to come to visit and work in China. And that to some extent explains why we need to have renew our administration of immigration affairs. In the past, we didn't have one.
Right.
Now we have one, and we need a better one. Why? Because China's status in the world has changed. And also, in part because China has become the second largest economy and is richer and more affluent than before. China has acquired greater responsibility of helping others. And that explains why we need to set up a new institution, like the Agency for International Development. So I think these institution changes are very important efforts to keep up with the changes of the time.
Professor Jia, you see different attitudes of debates taking place here in China about how to communicate with the rest of the world. Some say, why do they always criticize us? Whoever criticizes us, we're going to criticize them. Others say, we're going to have a community of shared future. So we have to, no matter how difficult it is, to communicate with the rest of the world, even though there are stubborn voices who are reluctant to try to understand China. So how do you see those two options? Do we have the best option, Professor?
Well, I think the rest of the world has a greater and greater interest in learning about what China is up to and where China is moving. It's natural because China has been rising very fast, and this is a very big country. Yeah, I think the Chinese government probably should be more straightforward in terms of explaining things, what's going on in China. There are great things and also some problems in China. We should face the fact that these both exist and try to explain why we made such a great achievement and why we still have the problems. We cannot just focus on one thing at the expense of the other. And also, probably the Chinese government should encourage the Chinese, especially the common Chinese, the intellectuals, the common people, to tell the Chinese story, their own experience.
Their own stories.
Yeah, their own stories. And this is the time, I think, China probably should adapt to its new status. Okay.
Which is?
China is a country of great strength and also influence now. It's no longer the poor and backward country of the past. Okay. China should probably adopt a new attitude toward international criticisms. That is, in Chinese we say 有则改之，无则加勉. You welcome the criticisms. When you get the criticisms, you examine them, analyze them. If they are right, then you try to make changes to make it better. If they are wrong, probably you should just ignore them. So you should have confidence, as President Xi repeatedly, advised the Chinese people to adopt this attitude, the attitude of confidence.
Right. 不要人夸颜色好.
Yeah. Instead of reacting to whatever criticism in a very emotional and negative way. Yeah.
Jia Qingguo, Standing Committee member of CPPCC. Before we go, a few words about Stephen Hawking, a brilliant physicist and author of the seminal A Brief History of Time, who died in this England home today, aged 76. His wicked sense of humor, fierce intellect, and illness set him apart in academia and popular culture. He came to symbolize the unbounded possibilities of human mind. And that is what we have for today. Thank you so much for being with us, and bye for now.